system works?
Mr. Chair, ginawa
You
naman po namin.
answer my question.
Ah,
Your monitoring system works? You're saying every day you check, you monitor? A day before she died, ganito yung situation. If you don't have the heart for the OFWs, ganito lagi mangyayari, araw-araw ganito mangyayari, taon-taon ganito nangyayari, sawang-sawa na kami mag-hearing dito.
Senators grilled the recruiter and employment agency of Julie Biranara, who was murdered last month in Kuwait.
Masama ang loob ko, the Secretary Tusople, and I said, I want a deployment ban. Kinontra niya ako. I was only suggesting. I don't know kung bakit mas pinapaboran niya yung mga pulisiya sa tingin niya para matulungan ang mga recruitment agency.
Targeted ban po. So by that, we mean yun pong ban na i-impose ay para po sa mga household workers bound for Kuwait na mga new hires po. Ang bulto po ng ating mga problema na nagkakaroon po ng pagmeltrato ay nandun po sa mga new hires na umaalis, sir. Kaya ito po ang sabi ni Secretary Toots na in the immediate, ito ay ating iban muna.
The Migrant Workers Department is halting the deployment of overseas workers to Kuwait, at least for overseas workers who are seeking employment in the Gulf state for the first time. This is on the heels of the brutal murder of Julie Biranara, whose case is yet to go to trial. What is the implication of this targeted deployment? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to the midweek edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao, and here with me in the studio is, of course, Robbie Alampaya of One News, and online from the port area in Manila, Alamani Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star. Ami and Robbie, happy week, happy midweek.
Happy Wednesday.
Sorry,
Happy Wednesday.
happy Wednesday. Okay, Ami, what's your big story?
Inapil na ng OSG yung decision ng ICC to proceed with the investigation of the drug deaths. No? So tingnan natin kung, well, we don't know kung anong pwede pa nilang i-present ang new arguments. Yun din the new argument, iba to overturn that decision.
Yeah. Although that is also expected naman to begin with.
Yes.
Also tonight.
Yun daw yung procedure talaga.
Yeah, and also tonight we have the deployment of a delegation of Filipinos to Turkey.
Yes.
For humanitarian assistance.
Turkey, baka hindi na-gets ng mga tao yun.
Yung dating Turkey. Turkey. Yeah.
So there's that. Of course, that was a malaking balita yun the past days, of course, yung ano, and until now, tumataas pa rin ang
I think they hit 10 already.
No, nasa 10,000 na. Diba? But that's for
Mga
both.
9,600.
So that's for both Turkey and Syria, if I'm not mistaken. Turkey, if you're already saying it that way, but as we said, that's something we're monitoring. And of course, back here on the domestic front, well, not necessarily here in the Philippines, but on the domestic front, President Marcos, off to his trip to Japan, of course, and many deals, both on the economic side and also, of course, security will be on the table.
Yes. Dumating na siya. Niintay natin yung detalye. And he wants closer collaboration daw with Japan on economic and yung patrol.
And defense.
Patrol
Security.
with support for our Coast Guard. So ayun, baka masama na rin sila sa mga joint patrols natin dyan sa, well, all over the country naman. Hindi lang naman sa West Philippine Sea. No?
Okay. But for our first topic for tonight, we of course talk about overseas workers and the limited, it's not really a full ban, it's a limited ban for new deployments in Kuwait in the wake of the murder of Julie Biranara. And we will speak to our first guest about that topic after a short break, so please stay with us. Deployment of first-time overseas workers to Kuwait is suspended for now in the wake of the brutal murder of Julie Ranara. Weighing in is recruitment consultant and migration expert Emmanuel Geslani. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening. I am deeply humbled and honored to be interviewed by the leading journalist in the Philippines.
Hindi naman, sir.
Wala po si Lucy Cruz Valdez.
Ako lang ay.
Kami lang po ito. Anyway, sir, but thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your taking the time. Sir, pero ito nga po we've already had two full deployment bans in the past vis-a-vis Kuwait in 2018, if I remember right, and then a short one in 2020. And now we have a partial ban for new deployment. So I'm wondering kung meron bang epekto itong mga ban na ito, and do we expect, or what do we expect from this, I don't know if you'd call it a partial deployment ban eh?
Well, actually, I've been moving for a limited deployment ban ever since this news came out. In my stories that I've filed with several media outlets, I asked the government to take a more extensive and study on the latest bilateral labor agreement forged in 2018 by a very high-powered panel, you know, and that was what I was asking for. But since the secretary decided that to impose a ban on new hires, we call them new hires, first-time workers, that is a right step towards resolving this problem.
Pero sir, just to give us an idea, when you speak about new hires, how many people are we talking about per day or per week or per month? Anong numbers that we're looking at here?
We're talking about 2,500 a month.
Okay.
All first-timers, all
For Kuwait.
to Kuwait.
Yes.
Pero ilan po doon ang first time to be deployed in Kuwait?
Well, I would say about 2,000.
Oh, ang dami rin ha?
Medyo dami nun
Yes.
Now, let me get
Kasi
to the,
nga, sorry.
it then also begs the question, sir, where exactly is the weak point there? Is it here at home as we train them, there's something missing in us prepping these first-timers to Kuwait? Or is it over there? Is there something that in the Kuwaiti system that for whatever reason triggers a abuse and maltreatment specifically of first-timers?
It works both ways, more here in the Philippines. The preparation of these workers are, you can say, very easy or very fast. No, these workers are garnered from the south and Mindanao. They are brought here for deployment. Now these workers go through first they get the passport. They go through an NC2 at TESDA, which is the certificate giving them the opportunity to the right to be deployed as household service workers. That is a very weak point. You know, the NC2 has to be revised, renovated, or maybe the NC2 will have to be specific, aside from being a general NC2 for the Middle East workers.
Okay, sir.
It covers all countries. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry po.
Go
Just a
ahead.
quick qualification. What is NC2? And why is this significant?
NC2 is, let me see. It is a training seminar given by the TESDA. It's called NC2.
Ano po yung tinitraining dyan sa seminar na yan? Kasi parang kulang na kulang, and we've had a lot of horror stories coming out of mostly Kuwait, no? At mukhang hindi yata nasasakop yun kung ano man yung nasasabi sa mga prospective household service workers natin. And as you've pointed out, malaki-laki din yung 2,000 a month going still to Kuwait after what happened to Joanna de Mafelis, And even before her, hindi ba, may mga 7 namatay nun. Kaya pinasuspinde for the first time ni President Duterte at the time, yung deployment.
Well,
dahil dun sa 7 actually.
I'll answer first your last comment that marami-rami. You know, when the Saudi deployment ban was imposed by former Secretary Silvestre Bello, we lost the Saudi market, which was a bigger market for the agencies recruiting deployment workers. And that's about 3,000 a month. Now, if you lose that kind of business, as a recruitment agency, you would shift to Kuwait. And Kuwait has no quota on the number of workers to accept as long as the labor attaché approves the verified contract and complies with the regulation, with the requirements, then the verified contract is sent here. So let's say it's a big deal for the agencies so wala silang negosyo, they had to move to Kuwait. So dumami. Actually, pre-pandemic, Kuwait had a bigger deployment to Saudi Arabia in the last 2017 and 14 to 17.
Sir, what exactly do you mean by
To answer your last question, the other part, it really needs a change for the module at NC2 because what they're teaching there are not sufficient for to comply with the requirements in Kuwait households. They're teaching them how to cook beef stew. The Arabians do not cook beef stew. They do not teach their language training to be able to communicate. Even though they speak English, not all Kuwaitis speak English. So, kulang ang training talaga. Maybe it should be more intensive and change the NC2 module to comply with Middle East countries.
Okay. Sir, I mean,
That's the
I think,
problem there.
yes, sir. But and to be fair, let's stress that we do start off. You start off acknowledging, look, that's a weakness on our side. Now, nonetheless, I imagine NC2 or any training programs we have, any policies that we have, apply to so many countries, even just taking the entire Middle East. For that matter, there are a lot of first-timers as well being deployed to other Middle Eastern countries. So we started with us, but now let's look on the other side of this. What makes the Kuwait experience different for first-time people being deployed?
Well, you know, Kuwait has a population of 4 million. And the per capita income is $92,000
Wow.
a year. So many of the Kuwaitis can afford to hire a domestic worker. And most of their spouses or the women, they don't work at all because there is enough income coming in from the Kuwaiti government. You know, they're being subsidized. Unfortunately, there are some bad eggs among the Kuwaiti people, and we cannot really screen all of them, even though there are rules. So most of them are, let's say, coming from the, the Bedouins. There are some Bedouin tribes who can hire domestic helpers. So you can just imagine what kind of education they have. You know, the Kuwait was a British colony, so we expect a lot of people there to be well-mannered and civilized. So really, you cannot really pinpoint how to avoid problems like this. You know, it comes.
Pero sir, bakit sir, bakit sir, on the surface at least, bakit parang mas malapit ang experience ng mga Pilipino sa Kuwait compared, for example, sa Saudi Arabia, where we have a lot more Filipinos and we don't seem to have that many cases similar to Kuwait?
Well, let me say this. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are just the same, you know, except that we had deaths in Kuwait, but I know there have been a few deaths in Saudi Arabia, but not really sensationalized because some of them really died natural deaths. Some of them I heard recently, and this has not been aired or come out in the media, that there was a household order there who took her life by suicide hanging, and that has not been revealed. So maybe the reporting system in Saudi Arabia is not good. Though we have a lot of household service workers also in the welfare centers. It's the same. It's the same thing happening. But I guess in Kuwait, it's because it's so small. One or two deaths. One death, of course, is one death is not
Yes, yes, sir.
is something else that we cannot just say one death now.
Yes, sir. Professor, are you saying na Saudi is just as problematic for overseas workers as Kuwait, except that we don't get as much information coming out
Yes,
about the situation?
we have a lot of household workers that are also distressed workers. But not as many. I guess the new rules that applied, forged in 2013 by former Secretary Baldos, that new bilateral agreement has probably more teeth than the one forged in 2018 with Kuwait.
Yun nga sana itatanong ko, Mr. Gislani. You mentioned the 2018 agreement, and there was a lot of fanfare about that agreement na between Philippines and Kuwait. Tight na daw yung mga ano doon, yung mga provisions to protect our OFWs, especially the household service workers. Sa tingin nyo, I'm sure you've read the agreement. You think which areas can use improvement, seeing what's happening now? Kasi hindi lang naman si Jollibee yung namatay, marami na nga, as I've mentioned. Meron ng 7 na, di ba, nagalit na si President Duterte. Sumunod pang 2 before this latest one.
Well, actually, no matter how tight the agreement is, no matter how many provisions you put there, there are 1 or 2 times na the agreement may be violated. But I'm not blaming the Kuwaitis. I might also add that among the first timers, maraming dyan na wala pang 3 months gusto nang umuwi. So pumupunta sila sa welfare center because most of them they just went for the ride, nakatikim ng konting mura o konting hindi naman, maybe verbal abuse. The women in Kuwait talagang may pit gusto na umuwi. So dumadami yung cases sa welfare center. Hindi namang marami yung abuse actually. Kasi kung may abuse, there is a mechanism for this. If there is an abuse and the worker is able to call the Philippine Embassy through the hotline, the Philippine Embassy, the Philippine Labat Attaché, the Polo, will now contact the foreign recruitment agency who is directly responsible for that worker. Now, the foreign recruitment agency, there is a process. Will visit the house of the employer and discuss with the employer what is the problem. Now, if it cannot be resolved because talagang gustong umuwi, maski very flimsy reason, then the worker will be transferred to the welfare center, especially pag 3 months, may guarantee na 3-month probation period yon. Sasagutin ngayon yon ng deploying agency here to replace them. So, the recruitment really is a very ticklish problem. It's not as easy as sending candies to the store.
Sir, one particular problem na pinupunteriya kanina ng mga senador, in particular, I think it was Senator Joel Villanueva, say yung monitoring, kamusta ba talaga? No, so malinaw, as you said, meron namang mechanisms, both with our embassies as well as with the agencies there. But a mechanism is one thing. Yung tanong talaga ni Senator Villanueva kanina is, how are we monitoring? Are we in fact monitoring? We can always say we're trying, but how effective is it?
Well, the monitoring system now is through social media. Most of our workers they have TikTok, they have Facebook, so they're able to contact their families here. All right, the family therefore, as the obligation if the worker is not able to contact the recruitment agency directly, no, then the family goes to the agency to report this matter. Now, yung sinasabi ni Senator Joel Villanueva, who was so very emotional about this, you cannot monitor hundreds of workers every day. Assuming you're a deployment agency, a recruitment agency which deployed Ranara,
Yes, sir.
maybe they have deployed hundreds already in the past few years. Now, there is supposed to be a monitoring system. That's part of the rules issued by the PUA. There should be a monitoring system for them. But of course, in fairness to the agency, you cannot monitor everybody every day. Now, with the problem with Ranara, I think there was really some fault in the agency which did not take action. I guess you heard what the lawyer said and revealed to the senators that there was already a relationship between Ranara and the son. So she would not have expected that it would turn out that way for her. Maybe there was some kind of violent argument or misunderstanding, and 17 years old, that's what happened. I cannot really give excuses for the agency, but it's part of their job also.
Mr. Gislani, sabi sa amin ng migrante, in the case of our local recruit, sabagay, pati siguro yung foreign, kahit daw ma-blacklist sila at masara yung recruitment agency, they can just easily change the business name and register. Yung iba daw nag-merge with other recruitment agencies at tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung operation. What do you say about that? That's migrante.
Well, if the recruitment agencies, the license is canceled right now of Catalyst, which is the recruitment agency. I'd like to say that almost half of the recruitment agency deploying household workers are Arab descent. So many of them are here. Supposedly, there's only 25% controlling interest. But the truth is they're the ones controlling the recruitment agency. Now, if the license is canceled, what they will do is they will look for a dummy or they will look for a very poor performing agency who's willing to serve the license, and they will just incorporate or buy the shares of that agency. It's really easy to do it because that's the rules of the SEC. You just buy the shares and then you probably change the name of that agency or later on change the name to your liking. But that's the awful truth. We have so many foreign recruitment agencies here. I mean, recruitment agencies controlled by Arabs, Arab descent. So it happens. Kanya nga madali, sabi nila.
So unless there's a complainant at tuloy yung prosecution, hindi sila matitigil pala. No?
Well, kung may complaint yung recruitment, there is a complaint and it's filed with the RTC, no? And it is the resolution comes out that the respondents, either the president, the chairman, some officers, are charged with illegal recruitment. That is forwarded to the PUA, and these persons are placed on the derogatory list. They cannot anymore participate in the business. That's why I said they get some dummies again to continue the business. It's as easy as that also.
Hirap, ano?
Sir, last question.
Go ahead.
Last question na lang po, and we'll zoom out a bit. We've had, in fairness, just a few months' experience with this brand new department for migrant workers. What's your assessment of this department so far? Has it found its footing? What's there to improve upon? And what would you say has been its immediate impact?
Well, I'm sorry to say it hasn't gone down. It hasn't gone down to running. I mean, when you jump into the business, you want it running. It's not. Unfortunately, processing is still 2 to 3 months. the president said 3 weeks. Now it's still 2 to 3 months. There are some gremlins inside the office. So it's not working very well. And sorry to say, the head is not always around. It's always with the president, globetrotting in the Philippines, around the world. So nothing is being done towards, we are asking what is the policy for overseas recruitment. This is what I wrote 2 to 3 weeks ago. What is the policy? Where is overseas recruitment headed for? But there are no policy statements yet. It's one problem after the other. So I hope that by March, when the full DMW is organized, I know it's difficult because they have some new people, but they still have some old people. So it's not running very well, to put it bluntly.
Sir, you spoke of gremlins. What exactly did you mean by gremlins? I suppose you're not talking about creatures that when they get wet, they multiply. Right? Why gremlins?
Some gremlins, they, I meant by gremlins, and sometimes they tinker around with your clock, they tinker around with something. Para bang lang yun, anong tawag na doon? I said gremlins, kasi meron pa rin mga matitigas ang ulo doon eh. Meron pa rin dong, I call them gremlins, kasi they're still in the what you call a GCash lane. Sorry, I said that.
Sir? Sorry, sir.
Gcash.
Sorry, I said that.
Ano yung facilitation?
I should have not said that.
Ano yung Gcash lane na yun?
Sir, would you want to elaborate on that?
You understand what I mean?
No, sir. No, sir. We don't want to assume. Huh? Maybe you can elaborate a bit.
We want to hear it from you.
Well, I only hear it from them.
Yes, sir.
It moves if there is a GCash. That's all. And I know the POA will get mad at me, then the bill will get at me, but that's the truth.
Is that, sir, the phrase that is popularly used in the industry to describe that? GCash laning?
Yes, yes.
So na-term na talaga siyang gano'n dahil medyo talamak?
Well, kasi sinasabi ng mga agency owner sa akin, anong problema mo? Hindi ka ba nag-GCash? Ayun ang tanong. Period.
Okay.
So, I heard that from them. I am just assuming that's true because they're talking of their problems with strictly with the, I'm sorry, I'm not in the middle, strictly with the POA. That's the truth, and I'm sorry to say that. I came from the industry myself, and I'm very sad that over the years of POA since 1982, it has come to this point na there is already, GNC in the business.
Ano yung GNC naman?
Traffic corruption.
Gremlins operating the Gcash lane for GNC. Ayan ha.
Kita mo naman si Ami gumawa kagad. On the spot, gumawa ng headline si Ami.
Susulat ko.
Okay. To be
Gremlins.
Ano ng GMC, good manners and conduct eh.
Yeah, totoo yan. I'm sorry to say that to them, but that's what's happening eh. And hindi pa rin nawawala eh. Sorry to say that against PUA. That's happening. So take it as a grain of salt, whatever.
Okay. Well, sir, maraming salamat. It was a pretty colorful, interesting conversation. Maraming salamat for joining
to be continued.
us. I'm sure we'll have you again.
To be continued.
I'm sure we will invite you again.
Baka ma-continue yan sa Senado.
Yung tinanong yung kay Syria eh.
Okay.
Well, thank you, sir. Recruitment consultant and migration expert, Mr. Emmanuel Keslani, sir. Maraming salamat for joining us tonight.
Maraming salamat, sir.
Thank you.
We are starting up another conversation after this break, so please keep it here in One News.
Filipinos are everywhere. That is not news. But of course, there are many initiatives as well to build strong Filipino communities abroad. Case in point, we now speak to Brendan Flores, President of the National Federation of Filipino-American Associations, or NAFA, or NAFA. Good evening, Brendan. Welcome to the Chiefs.
Evening.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. First of all, am I pronouncing that right? NAFA? NAFA? How do you call it?
The first one, it's NAFA.
NAFA, okay. Now, tell us about NAFA, and more importantly, tell us about, well, this very big community that you're trying to represent.
Yeah, so NAFA, or the National Federation of Filipino-American Associations, it is the largest Filipino-American organization in the U.S. With this very immense responsibility to really bring and unite and of course empower, right, the 4 million diverse voices of Filipinos and Filipino-Americans living in the United States. We focus on 3 specific pillars, and that's on leadership development, civic engagement, and advocacy. You know, I don't know if you're aware, but Filipinos are the 3rd largest Asian American group in the United States, consisting over close to 4.5 million across, again, the 50 states in the U.S.
Yeah, we are, of course, very much aware. We're also very much aware Filipino is one of the fastest growing ethnic languages in many states on both coasts. But tell us, what has actually changed with the Filipino-American community, say, from the generation of Ed to your generation now?
You know, I think a lot of it is we're seeing a lot of collaboration, right? As a matter of fact, just recently during the midterm election, we saw over 40 Filipino Americans elected to office. And what's exciting for me is seeing also younger people getting involved. We had almost a dozen Gen Z and millennials elected to office. The other thing from a diversity standpoint, about 20 plus, are women. And again, to me, that signifies that Filipinos are making a name for themselves and not afraid to enter politics or other critical jobs or professions in the United States. So I think we're seeing, again, a big difference on that space.
Are Filipinos in the U.S. following closely what's happening in the Philippines? Because I'm sure you're aware of the dramatic developments last year in the country.
You know, I think you can't take that away, especially for our older Filipino Americans, right? Our Filipinos living in the U.S. I think there is a huge attachment to the motherland, especially when it comes to politics. I hear it. You know, as national chairman of the organization, you have pro-administration. You have folks that are, not really too happy about what's going on in the Philippines. But I think many of them, outside of just politics, they're very much engaged or entrenched in what's happening in terms of, economic growth or support for their family members, especially during disasters, right? Since the Philippines always get hit in some kind of disasters, whether it's a typhoon or earthquake. So I think a lot of emphasis on that outside of the Philippine politics.
What about the younger generation? Are they still interested in the motherland? Do they consider the Philippines the motherland?
You know, you'd be very surprised. Yes, I would say, look, there's over 4.5 million Filipino Americans, right? So I can't say all, 50% of them are so invested. I think, one, for those folks who are not invested, I think it's a matter of not having enough visibility or education about the motherland, right? And for those folks who have the opportunity to have a lot more visibility, they definitely do. I mean, there's a lot of programs happening in the United States where they're bringing young Filipino Americans to the Philippines to experience what it's like, to connect with, with the community, with the business owners. And there's, I'm proud to say, I mean, in different states in the U.S., you have a lot of organizations pushing for Filipino curriculum, right? Because to your point, we have a lot of folks who would want to learn about their culture and their heritage and their history, of course. And that I see a lot of that happening for sure.
But how difficult is it for the younger generation to relate to what's happening in the Philippines? I mean, of course, in the U.S., you have a lot of issues there yourself. You have politics, you have racial issues, and so on down the line. So I'm just wondering how how difficult or easy it is for the younger generation to be able to relate to a country and a culture half a world away?
I think it's case by case. I think that's the power of social media, right? I mean, these young folks have access to everything, whether it's TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, or their parents. So I think they're definitely in the know. Again, I'm not going to say it's everyone, I think, but the majority are aware of what's going on, and they relate because there's a lot of things that are happening very similar in the United States, whether it's Asian hate, right? Whether it's a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think there's again, a lot of similarities between the United States and in the Philippines. So you got these young folks who are a lot more, I think I'm seeing a lot more activism with young people, which I think is a good thing because they want to have a voice, they want to be heard, and because of so much access, they have the ability to know exactly what's going on across the globe.
Brendan, and then I do agree with you, and certainly everybody will agree that linkages need not just be based on politics, need not just be based on even on history, not even just based on family, as important as it is for Filipinos. We can be linked as well with opportunities. We can be linked as well in terms of investments, business. You mentioned a lot of innovators among Filipino-Americans there. We have a very vibrant startup community in the Philippines as well. I'm wondering if you're actively building these linkages, especially between innovative, enterprising young Filipinos in the United States and innovative, enterprising young Filipinos back here in the motherland.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that, and we have a partner organization. It's the Filipino-American Chamber of Commerce, right? And they do a lot of events between the U.S. and the Philippines, attracting, Filipino-Americans or other investors to come to the Philippines and invest. As a matter of fact, not only that we're the third largest Asian American group in population, but also buying power, right? Accounting for 146 billion, right, or 14.4% of the market. And that's significant, I think, because seeing that wealth, I mean, you see a lot of younger and older generations expanding, right, their portfolio, and many of them coming to the motherland and starting, to your point, new businesses.
Brendan, you mentioned Asian hate crimes. Several Filipinos have been targeted as well, right? And I think there have been deaths. Can you update us on what's happening?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a big case in the U.S. and I wish I can say it's going to stop eventually. But as an organization and really the Filipino-American community, we continue to fight for racial profiling and Asian hate, right? So a lot of that has to do with education and self-protection or self-defense. I mean, I'm sure you all have heard several incidents that took place over the past couple of years. A man in New York getting slashed, right? His face, right? Because of Asian hate. So as the Filipino-American community, we're in tune with what's going on. And what we're doing is just really connecting between organizations to provide resources or support. We're also partnering with other Asian American groups to combat Asian hate. And then, of course, with government support, that's also something of critical. And we do the same exact thing in terms of partnerships and providing resources across the country.
Is the Filipino-American community satisfied with the U.S. law enforcement response to the problem?
I would say no, right? Because I think it's continuing to happen, and it's not just for the Filipino-Americans. I think it's the broader AAPI, or the Asian American Pacific Islander group. I mean, just recently, again, it's not specific to Filipino, but other incidents are definitely occurring. So I think we have some of our kababayans kind of losing hope, right? Is this, how long is this going to continue? It's unfortunate, right? And I think in terms of the support from, the police officers, I think they're doing what they can. But again, it's a big issue across the country, right? It's very divisive, and we're seeing a lot of those coming up.
What would you like to see by way of government action? What more can the U.S. do? Federal, local? What would you like to see?
I think I'm speaking for a lot of Filipino Americans and other Asian Americans. I think strengthening safety and security measures, right, for our kababayans, for the AAPI community. and really taking it very seriously. It has to be a huge offense. And in fairness to the administration and other folks, I mean, they've done a lot, right? But I think we need to continue that and remove the perception that, you know, Asian Americans or Filipinos are just visiting the United States. No, we're part of the American fabric. And a lot of it, too, I think it goes back to education, right? They need to teach the importance of Asian American history, for me, particularly Filipino-American history, because some folks may not be aware, right? And we also need to ensure that we're electing politicians who care about diversity, right? And who's not going to be polarized or divisive between communities. And I think a lot of that happens in the U.S., where you elect someone who, you know, only cares about a certain group, and it can't be like that, because we're a melting pot in the United States, and we need people who act and think like that.
Brendan, you mentioned Filipinos being part of the fabric of America, and certainly, despite all of these challenges and problems, Filipinos continue to go where opportunities or even challenges may lie. You are president of NAFA, that's the National Federation of Filipino-American Associations. We of course always go for the low-hanging. We mentioned East Coast, West Coast, but tell us about your member associations, and in particular, are there regions, are there states that we don't traditionally think about that you might actually surprise our viewers with, that, you know, that the community is actually quite active or burgeoning, maybe even in some of states that could surprise some people?
Yeah, you know, and I get the opportunity to understand data, right? Or research data, rather. And the Filipino population is continuing to grow. And I think what's the beautiful thing about our culture, we assimilate very quickly, right? Kind of like where you go everywhere, you see a lot of Chinatown. And now for me, I'm seeing more Filipinos wherever I go. And I travel across the United States to meet with our communities. And to your point, it's not just in New York or in Honolulu or in Los Angeles and San Diego or you know, in big metropolitan cities. But I'm even seeing Filipinos in Missouri, right? Or in the South, where I live in Florida. You would think there aren't that many Filipinos in Florida alone, the state of Florida, which is a very conservative state. Over 160,000 Filipinos. In Las Vegas, where I grew up, it is now the largest Asian American group, right? And as a matter of fact, second largest immigrant group after Mexicans. So as you can imagine, again, you know, the Filipino population is continuing to grow, not just in big cities, but even in small towns. And certainly we're seeing that in politics, in entertainment, and other critical professions.
Well, we also know that you're visiting here. Could you tell us why you're here? What are your objectives?
Yeah, you know, the last time I came back home was a little over a decade ago. I've been busy. And I wanted honestly, just to see the country, you know, how much it has changed over the last decade, because I haven't been back. And obviously my parents are from Calapan, Oriental Mindoro, right? Mm-hmm. And I have a grandmother who lives there, who moved from Lake Tahoe, California. So I wanted to also see her. But the other part of it is really meeting with several government officials to talk about different things, whether it's bilateral relations, immigration, protecting our Filipino nurses and teachers in the U.S. We're also having different conversations about investments and businesses. I think to one of your questions earlier, you know, how are young people getting engaged? And as a national federation in the U.S., we have, you know, hundreds of member organizations across, again, the 50 states that we represent. So it's important for us to ensure that there is a strong partnership between the Filipino-American community and the government here, or different business investors to keep that growing, because we are invested in seeing this country grow because we have that attachment. This is our motherland, and we also want to help and support.
So how much has the country changed? Are we growing fast enough? Are we growing? Are we becoming better?
You know, I can't, from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for other folks. You know, it's my second day in the Philippines. I flew into Manila, and I'm
That's
super
long
jet-lagged.
enough to have an opinion.
No, 2 days. But I am paying attention. I do follow what's going on in the Philippines, and I flew into Palawan earlier this morning, right? So I haven't. I'm quite exhausted.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I had dinner in BGC. I didn't know what BGC was.
Yeah.
And I remember, close to 15 years ago, it wasn't fully developed. And it's to me, it's just fascinating to see the growth of the Philippines, particularly in that area. It looks like Singapore or some metro city in the United States. So to me, that makes me feel proud. But then at the same time, you look, behind that, you still see a lot of poverty, right? So that to me still is a concern. Well, you have this facade that we're growing, but what are we really doing behind the scenes? And one thing that didn't change is traffic. I mean, I was in traffic for a couple of hours, so that part I absolutely did not miss. But I think we're growing. I think we're growing positively, but the question is sustainability.
Okay. Now, Brendan, final question. When your American friends ask you about the Philippines, and I'm not talking about Filipino-Americans, obviously, but when your friends, associates in America ask you about the Philippines, what do they ask? What do they want to know or understand?
Yeah, good question. So I actually brought 2 of my Caucasian friends to the Philippines. And the first question that they ask is the Philippines safe, right? That always comes up for non-Filipino friends. The other thing is the Philippines develop, right? Do they have the infrastructure? And third, and this is, I think, unfortunately, obviously, it's in the media. Do they have a lot of killings in the Philippines? I think that's fresh in people's mind, right? Outside of the exciting things that's happening in different islands across the country, and the tours, I think those are primary concerns and questions that do come up in almost every conversation.
Okay. Wait,
so
how
I
do you
think we got
answer
to change that narrative.
How do you answer the question?
Yes, yes, yes. That's a yes, and a yes.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway, Brendan Flores, a pleasure speaking with you. Welcome back. Enjoy your time, and good luck on your mission. Brendan Flores is president of the National Federation of Filipino-American Associations, or NAFA. Maraming salamat, Brendan.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is it for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.